earlier tonight, I spoke with a man from Kibbutz Nahal Oz, where Judith and Natalie Renan were captured. They were visiting there. His name is Amir Tibon. He's a correspondent for the newspaper Haaretz, and he met Judith and Natalie at the celebration for the kibbutz's anniversary. On the morning of the 7th, the day the terror attack began, he, his wife Miri, and two young daughters woke up to the sound of incoming mortar fire, then machine guns and men speaking Arabic around them. They spent the next 10 hours or so in their safe room in the dark with no electricity, no food, very little water. 10 hours with two little girls, the youngest just a year and a half old. I talked to him about that, but we began with the two hostages who were free today. Amir, the two American hostages who were released today, Judith and Natalie Renan, were visiting your kibbutz for a celebration before the attack. I'm wondering, when you heard they had been released, what did you think?
I was very happy because I knew they had come to our community for a celebration marking 70 years to the foundation of our small community, our kibbutz Nahal Oz, which is located very close to the border with Gaza. And we were all very, very worried after we didn't know what had happened to them for a few days since the massacre and the tragedy on October 7. And when I first heard that two American citizens, a mother and her daughter, had been released, I began to hope that it would be them. I know the grandmother in this family very well. She's a neighbor and a friend and an admired woman in our community. And I was just very, very happy to learn that indeed they are now safe and out of harm's way. But it's important to remember we still have about 200 other people who are still in the hands of Hamas, and it's a very dire situation.
I just spoke to a spokesperson for the IDF. He raised the possibility that they released two Americans specifically, perhaps for some propaganda value, thinking that might weaken support for Israel in the United States. Do you think it's just a coincidence that it happened to be two Americans?
I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's because the United States administration, led by President Biden and Secretary Blinken, has done a great effort to release the secure of American citizens and to make sure that we will see some kind of a diplomatic breakthrough to open the door for a possibility of perhaps more hostage deals of this kind that would lead to others being released. There's a lot of criticism here in Israel about the fact that we're not getting clear messaging from our own government about this very painful issue of the hostages. And I do want to thank President Biden and Secretary Blinken for at least putting the hard work to see these two women released. And I hope this is not the last step. I hope this is just the beginning of a larger effort, because we have women and children there held by a terror organization. And we also the cruelty, the barbarity, the just, unbelievable violence of Hamas. We have to get these citizens, first and foremost, women and children, but all the Israeli citizens, out of their hands.
I was just in Nir Oz yesterday. Some 400 people used to live there. They believe now about a quarter of them are either dead or missing. It's stunning.
Yeah, that's a kibbutz about 20 minutes from our community. The names are similar, so everybody asks me, but in Nahal Oz, we had a smaller tragedy, but still, my own neighbor, who was a very brave man who went out to fight the terrorists, was killed, and other members of the community are kidnapped. And this community you mentioned, Nir Oz, what they went through is unspeakable. And there are many, many people still there in Gaza in the hands of Hamas. We're all so relieved and happy to have two of the hostages return back home. But we need to open the door for more of this, because that is the only way they can get out. And I know the administration is working on it and speaking with Qatar and other potential mediators. It's very important. We have our own commitment to these Israeli citizens to bring them back home.
What was your neighbor's name who was killed?
Ilan Fiorentino, my next door neighbor, was the security coordinator for our community, a civilian, but the man responsible for all the ties with the military and actions to protect our community. And that morning, when most of us went into our homes and locked ourselves in the safe rooms with our young children, he went out to try to stop them. One man against 100 terrorists. he didn't have a chance, but still he went out to fight and he bought us some time. He left behind 3 young daughters, wonderful girls. It's very sad, and we're trying now to put the pieces together and return somehow to being the community we used to, but we're never going to forget what we lost on that day.
You, your wife, your 2 small kids, as you said, you hid in your safe room 8 or 9 hours, I understand. Your mother and father raced down from Tel Aviv in their Jeep to rescue you. Your father is a retired major general, was senior commander of the Israeli paratroopers. Did you know he was on his way? Did you know he was determined to get there?
Yeah, he told us in the morning after we had called them to tell them there were terrorists outside our window that he's coming to try to rescue us. And I have to say, Anderson, our story became famous all over the world. President Biden heard about it because he met my father and I when he was in Tel Aviv this week on a very important and impressive visit to support Israel. But there were hundreds of stories of courage by ordinary Israelis on that day. People went out to try to fight with whatever they had to save their families, to save others. It was the biggest failure in the history of any Israeli government, and we are going to make sure that anybody involved in this, starting from the highest ranks, will no longer have any impact on our lives when the moment comes to deal with it. But it was also one of the most beautiful moments of the Israeli people, of those who went out to fight and went out to help others. And I'm very proud of what my parents did and of many, many other people who contributed on that day to try to save lives.
I've read about it, but I do want to ask you about it. When your father actually got to your safe room, what was that moment like, and what was it that he said to you?
He knocked on our window of the safe room. He knocked on the window of the safe room, which you cannot see through. It's completely dark. So there's like an iron, disc there that makes it completely dark inside. He said, "I'm here." My young daughter, 3.5 years old, said, "Grandpa is here." And it was a very exciting moment. We started crying. We opened the door to the house after more than 10 hours, completely locked in the dark. He came in, soldiers came in, and soon neighbors began to come in because our house became like the front command of this group of special forces that released our community. And when the neighbors came in, on the one hand, it was a moment of joy because we were so happy to see and hug everyone, but it was also a moment of great sadness because we began to understand the magnitude of the disaster that, one neighbor was killed and another was injured and a third one was missing. And we went through this emotional roller coaster of, being happy to be alive and to see people that we were so worried for, but also to learn of what our community had just lost. And we're still coping with that part.
Amir, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I'm so sorry for what happened to your community and to your friends in that community who died. I appreciate you speaking with us.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate again the support of the United States at this very important moment for our country.